Fire away.
Fire away. What is this? Somebody getting shot?
I hope not.
Oh, well,
Or fired? Is somebody getting future endeavored?
I hope
Frank.
not. We haven't even started yet.
Yeah, Frank, Dennis, and I have been talking, and it's time.
Frank, I've been asked to come on the show for a really tough conversation.
Yes. And your replacement is here, Frank. We wanted you to be able to place a face to your disappointment, and
I'll still support the show.
Oh, well, we appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm the face of many people's disappointment. So,
well,
funny,
our
I'm
guest...
the face of my parents' disappointment. So, congratulations.
Just don't be your wife's disappointment. That's what you want to stay away from, I think.
I don't have a wife.
Okay. Well, fair enough, Dennis.
Who's our guest?
Our guest this week.
Hey, that was pretty cool.
Mr. Josh Chernoff.
Hey, how's it going? I was just hitting things on my roadcaster, making.
Is that like whenever you're introduced, does that noise happen?
It just goes.
Man, that's pretty cool.
Whenever you enter a room, that's delicious.
I didn't even know that was on there, but apparently it is. But hey, thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. No, we're excited to have you, sir. Very excited.
Very pumped, very excited.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, making an appearance back this week is the Demi.
The Demi. That Josh, in case you're unaware, that is the will be annual, but for our award show, we do affectionately call the podcast the Demi Pod, and that is the Demi Award.
Very nice.
Yes.
I support that completely. I have a Sherney Award right behind me that I gave myself on my show.
Oh, good for you.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I always joke around because up in one, you can't see it, but up in one of these cases is an actual award I've won.
Okay.
But no one ever sees that. But my fake award that I gave myself sits there. So,
well, it's kind of a pro wrestling tradition.
Yeah, right.
That nothing is what it seems. It's like when my kids ask me, Daddy, what do I tell people you do for a living? And I said, girls, Daddy lies for a living. Daddy's a professional liar.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they didn't actually say that, but I'm sure it explains a lot. All right. Well, Dennis, Frank, Josh, are we ready to go?
Let's get it ripped.
Good.
All right. Where are we starting out, Frank?
So, Josh, why don't you tell us about your background, how you growing up, were you a fan of the business? Who did you like? What did you watch?
So where I explained to all of your fans why the hell I'm here. Yeah.
We'll get to that too.
So my background, I've been a fan my entire life. It was probably 1989 or so when it started. So not my entire life, although I'm fine if people think I was born in 89. But as long as I can remember, I've been a wrestling fan. I don't have that memory of some people are like, oh, I remember the first match I saw, and I don't have that. But I do just remember always being fascinated with it. My favorite of all time was Bret the Hitman Hart, going back to the Hart Foundation days. So I was always drawn to the realism, the story, the technique in that regard. That's not to say, listen, during high school, I was a big fan of The Rock and Stone Cold. So it's not like I didn't like any of the entertainment side of it. Huge fan of that stuff. But from an in-ring wrestling standpoint, I just the little things, man. Bret Hart would get punched, and just the way it looked. Yeah. It was different. And I could even tell as a kid back then, it was just different. Like I think I just felt it differently. So yeah,
I think
always
you don't even necessarily identify it at that time, but you just it's like you said, it's just different. And
at the time I was probably like, those sunglasses are awesome, but but I just was always such a fan of him. And it's funny because it was kind of juxtaposed to, I was a big Shawn Michaels fan too, and very different styles, but the two of them together just complemented each other so well in the ring. But
both
but
super technical.
Yep. Yeah.
You know?
Just different type of technique, right?
Yes.
But both very technical in what they were doing.
And snug and always there, not a lot of daylight between, you know, there wasn't not much that either ever did in either of their careers looked phony.
Yeah.
You know, that's a big thing.
So yeah, what else am I supposed to say about myself here?
No, I mean, for that, like, I mean, 100%, man, I'm on board. And those are the technical guys were the ones that like I identified with so much. So to hear you say that, I'm like, okay, I'm not such a weirdo.
No, that was my thing. Now at the same time, like I look back on events like everybody talks about how WrestleMania 9 was like the worst WrestleMania ever. That's like one of my favorites of all time.
Really? Which
So
one
like
was that?
that was the Vegas one, the Toga Party.
Oh yeah.
Now I was 9 years old at the time. So in fairness, like, you know, it was pretty cool. But to me, I just thought I was like, this just looks amazing, you know? But yeah, so I like both sides of it, but the technical side of wrestling has always been,
that's cool.
I guess the showmanship alongside the technical, right? Like I don't want to just watch technical wrestling with absolutely no energy behind it. You know, it's got to really, it has to be something that pulls you in. But yeah. So that's my fandom. Which was, before I got into the business. Because then you can never look at the business the same way, right? Once you're in it. But
no, in a strange way, it kind of ruins the business for you. I mean, you still love it, but you learn to love it in a different way.
Yeah. No, you that's very well said. Yeah. And obviously from somebody who's experienced that firsthand, but yeah. No, it's true because you can't, once you get that peek behind the curtain. Thing was like, I always look at it as like somebody who was a kid and just was obsessed with magic and grew up and studied to become, the world's greatest magician. They're not going to feel the same way about it as they did when they were a kid. They know all the tricks now. They know how it's done. But
magic is the perfect analogy.
But now they have a different appreciation, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect analogy, truly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad I could bring that.
You can't put the rabbit back in the hat, So it's
true.
like, you're like, well, shit, that's cool that now, like, I think every fan, it is that juxtaposition of like, they want to know and they want to know more and more and more. And it's like, listen, I don't want to ruin it for you. Like the Wizard of Oz was so much cooler before you peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, right.
And that peak, it's like, be careful what you wish for, you know?
And then it's because what has to happen is, and I feel like it's what's happened with wrestling today with fans. They're no longer fans the way that they used to be, where they were watching something they thought was real and they were really invested in that regard. Now they watch it in like to be appreciative of your performance, right? Like where they're looking at it going, okay, I know you're not really going to try and punch him in the face as hard as you can, but I want to believe that you are. So I'm going to cheer for the one that really makes me believe that. Unfortunately, I feel like what happens is you have wrestlers out there who are not as well trained as they should be and know they're going to get a reaction. Well, okay, if we need to make you think that we're really punching each other in the face, well, if we just really punch each other in the face, then the fans are going to pop for it. And they're missing, I feel like they're kind of missing the art of it, but that's, just my opinion on it.
I don't disagree. I mean, I think that what has come of it at this point is just a work upon a work upon a work. And like, you just don't know who's being worked at this point. Like the term mark doesn't even fit in today's business because it's like, who's really the mark?
Right.
Like, nobody knows anymore. It's turned into, it's always been kind of a circus, but now it's like a circus within a circus. So it makes no sense. But is what it is. Still get bit by the bug. That's the way it was. That was the analogy that was termed to me when I was on the come up was, you get bit by the bug. And then once you get bit by the bug, you're sick. And like, you can't get
Never
rid of
goes
sickness.
away.
Yeah. And it never does. And truly that's what happened to me. Cause I know my first match was a battle royal. And before I went out, I'm looking around this locker room and I'm thinking to myself, like, these are not my people. Like this is not birds of a feather. And I figured, okay, I'll wrestle and I'll do this one. And then I'm out of this shit. And I went through the curtain, and even with like the, 10 people that were at that Knights of Columbus, it was still performance. And that was the bug. And the bug got me that night. And, 20 some odd years later, here I am.
And it's cool because it's a performance that you just can't replicate it anywhere else, even when there are only 10 people in there. I mean, I've literally wrestled in front of one person before.
Yeah.
That is, I would wrestle. I would be less nervous, I feel like, to wrestle in front of 100,000 than one.
Yeah.
Because it is just the most uncomfortable. Like, you kind of want to stop and just be like, hey, we all know what's happening here. But it can get really uncomfortable.
That time Dennis wrestled in front of one person, he didn't have any clothes on. So that
was weird.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Talk about uncomfortable.
Yeah. Mostly for the person watching.
He did the job, though. He still jobbed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still did the job.
Sometimes you got to put yourself over. So no, I just think it's a form of performance that you can't find anywhere else, because it's really you get to go out there and both be yourself and not yourself at the same time. It's like as close to when I watch my kids playing and like you see how intent they're into whatever game it is, and it's just completely real in that moment for them. That's kind of what you get to do in a way. It's really it's very cool. And if you've never done it, then sometimes you don't understand, but it's amazing feeling.
You get the hall pass to do it as an adult.
Yep. You get to just play.
It's a strange reality of it. Frank, what do you have next? Because I know what my next question would be. I
think the obvious question was going to be, Josh, how did you get in the business? Why did you get in the business?
We're on the same page, Frank.
Yeah.
Maybe
so
you're not fired.
When I was 9 years old, Bill Apter moved into my neighborhood.
Oh, no kidding.
And that, I think, changed everything. I don't know, because at that, when I was getting into the business, like when I officially started training, it was not easy to find a way to get into the business. So I feel like if I didn't have that connection to Bill, and he moved into the neighborhood, and my brother and myself and our friends, we show up at his house to watch pay-per-views and do the,
my God.
But
I was kind of hoping you were going to say he moved into your attic.
No. He currently lives in my attic, but that's just
that's for another podcast.
No, but so his daughter was in the same grade as my sister, and so they hit it off and became like best friends, and to the point, she was at his daughter's wedding and vice versa. So like they're still close, and so Bill became just a close family friend, and so when I was, I already had in my mind by 9 years old, I already knew I wanted to be a professional wrestler, and so now it's like I'm presented with this. Oh, and you're wondering how can you do it? Well, ask this guy. He knows everybody. So I started, I went to the Wild Samoan Training Center off of the Wild Samoans school. And so, but I was told, okay, well, you're not old enough yet, because I was 15, and they said, you're not old enough yet to train. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just do my own thing. I had this idea. I'm like, well, there's little league for, you've got these young kids playing baseball, these young kids playing football. I'm wrestling in high school at this point, but why can't, and you can do theater. So I'm like, so this is a sport and theater. And like, I'm trying to wrap my head around the idea of why a 15-year-old could go out on a mat and do amateur wrestling for high school, and can go out on a stage and do a performance at their school, but can't do professional wrestling. So I started this thing called the Teenage Wrestling Foundation when I was 15, and we put on a show. First, it was at the gym at my school, and then we put on a show we actually rented the ring from Jim Kettner, ECWA.
Oh, geez.
Where I know Bobby that I know that you've worked there before because I was just uploading your video, and we'll get to that. Get to that in a bit. But so then we rented that. Then I rented a ring from Alpha when we did a show at the Fort Washington Expo Center. So it was like this really big performance. And I think at that point I was 16, but we're in the local newspaper and all that. So again, you talk about the bug. I had the bug and wasn't even properly trained. We had some indie workers like show up, like we booked them to show up to train us that day. But we pretty much put on like a show. We didn't really even do that many moves. Like we just kind of did the entertainment side of it. Because I looked at it and said, I was like, I want to get into this any way I possibly can.
Sure.
I want to wrestle. So I'll do it that way. And once I graduated, well, right before I graduated high school, I went up to the Wild Samoan Training Center and actually started training. So that's where I actually went and trained. And then I promoted a few more shows as I got older. When I was like 19, I did it again when I was like in my 20s. And then a guy named Kevin Keenan, who's a referee. He was with the WWE at the time.
Keener. That's Mike Keener.
No, not Mike Keener. No,
Kevin Keenan.
So Kevin Keenan, he does some stuff for like NWA now. He's been doing some stuff with NWA.
It does sound familiar. We may have crossed paths because it's
probably. I mean, it's but
it's a small world.
Yeah, absolutely. So he was down in OVW at the time in 2007, and I was on the Indies, and he sends me an AIM instant message. And and he pretty much like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, hey, how's it going down there? And he was in developmental, but also on the ECW brand at the time for WWE. And he's just like, man, he's like, what are you doing on the Indies? He's like, come down here. Like, if you really want to do this, come down here. And I had been off and on for years of, I wasn't every weekend traveling. I was, a couple times a month or whatever. So at that point, I'm like, you know what? I really do want to do this. Let me go down and try this. But I want to make sure I want to erase all of my bad habits. So I want to come to the beginner's class, which was Joey Matthews at the time for a couple of weeks. Then it became Nick Dinsmore. So I went in, I learned from Nick. And what I did was I started setting up the ring for OVW at their house shows. And I would go and sit next to Al Snow, just the whole show long. And in the beginning, I was just kind of eavesdropping and listening to what Al had to say. But over time, Al starts directing his lessons kind of towards me, which was awesome. I wasn't contracted. I wasn't, I was just down there on my own, but I was kind of getting this education from Al, and, what to do, what not to do. And then from the beginner class, I went on to train under Rip Rogers, who is a character and a half. And still is to this day. He is still, but so that was an experience, but yeah, so I got to learn there. And then I was there from 2007 to 2008. And then WWE moved everybody to Tampa. And at the time, what I was doing down there, I was driving. So when Kevin Keenan got moved to Tampa first, he had been driving Drew McIntyre and Wade Barrett, who had just joined. They had just come over. They didn't have driver's license in the U.S. So he had been driving them to the shows. So when he left, he asked me, he's like, hey, can you drive them?
Oh, shit.
Absolutely. I'll do that. Yeah. So I became, great friends with those guys, but was able to talk about the matches afterwards. And obviously they were still green at the time too, even though Drew had been put on TV, but I think everybody remembers how that went. But that was my claim to fame, that I would drive Drew to the airport for him to go to SmackDown, and then pick him up so he could go to OVW afterwards. But but it was a great experience. It was a lot of fun. Yeah. But when WWE left, I remember Wade Barrett had offered for me to sleep on his couch in Tampa. And he's like, they're not opening it up to anyone, but I can try to see if maybe you can get some like after hours work. And at that point, I was kind of burnt out. I was, I'm only 5'8". I'm not a huge guy. I've had neck injuries since high school before the pro wrestling stuff. So,
oh boy.
So I was kind of like, you know what? I'm a little burnt out. I'm going to go home, just take a couple indie bookings. This is my short version, by the way. But I came home, I worked the indies a little bit. My last match that I had was against Rich Swann in his first match.
Oh, wow.
And Rich was a great kid back then. Like he was just, I'm not going to say, oh, I knew he'd be a star or whatever, but I just knew he was a really good guy back then. He was very respectful, way more respectful than I deserved, but they were treating me since I had been in OVW for a cup of coffee. Now, all of a sudden I was this, this veteran in the locker room, which was ridiculous. But no, so I had that match with Rich, and I remember we did a crucifix pin, and it wasn't the actual pin itself, but when I rolled backwards out of on the kick out, I felt like this like crunch in my neck. And that was at that point, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take a break. And that was it. So I never wrestled again. And I thought I was out of the business entirely. And then about 10 years after that match, I bumped into Bill Apter. I was driving in the old neighborhood, and he's taking the trash out. And I stopped, said hello to him. We, of course, had stayed in touch and everything, but we hadn't really seen each other in a while. And he's like, come on downstairs. Come on to Apter's Alley. And so I went down there, and he's showing me everything. He's like, you should come back on Wednesday. I do a YouTube show. You should come host it with me. I'm like, all right, that'd be kind of neat. So I did that with him, and he's like, this was great. This was so much fun. He's like, but you need a gimmick. He's like, you got to come back again, but you need a gimmick. I'm like, well, what gimmick? I'm just me now. I'm just Josh Chernoff. I'm just, and that's where you see behind me, all these ties. That's where that came from, of just getting like the airbrush ties and stuff like that, which has kind of become a bit of a gimmick for me when I do shows. And
gimmicks work.
And then that was it. One thing led to another. Started doing a podcast with him, started doing shows, and ended up in streaming. And
now here we are.
And now here we are with Premier Streaming Network. And super excited to have you guys on the network. Which is, it's just really cool. Like we're really pumped to have you guys on there. This was just, getting to be in the business from so many different sides of it, having my own show and being a promoter before and being in the ring and all of that. I feel like once I got behind the scenes in the streaming world, I was able to almost look at it in a slightly different way of like knowing what the talent wants and what the promoters want and the content creators want. And I think now with Premier, that's something that I'm able to really offer. And I'm excited to be able to offer, because I think the better the atmosphere is for the content creators and the promoters, the better the experience is going to be all the way around. I think everybody's just going to be more motivated. If you're having fun doing something, you're going to be more motivated.
If you're not having fun, I think it's impossible to be creative. Like my wife teaches barbering, and like she loves cutting hair and doing hair because she's got cosmetology and she's got all of it. But she's excited over it. So like when she does it, like, she's putting her heart into it. And I think that goes for, anything. If you're not loving it, it's really difficult to be creative because you don't give a shit.
And I think when you're a creative person, it's incredible. It can get really depressing too. If you're not having fun because you don't have that outlet. You need to be able to, to be creative with people. I completely get where you're coming from with that. Like, I think that is the kind of the cross that creative people have to bear, is you've got to have, and if you don't have it at that time, like you've got to find, it has to become your mission. Like you've got to find your outlet. Cause if not, like you're just not going to be happy. Yeah. No, absolutely. And it was tough. I know for me, I was very lucky. I worked in commercial real estate, went into a family business and was working first went in working with my grandfather and then was working with my brother. And it just, which was great, gave me a ton of business experience, which is great for what I'm doing now.
Sure.
But there was no creative outlet. So I'd play some music places. I did some acting and all, but like you talked about that bug with wrestling, for me, it was even subconsciously, it was like, how do I get back to wrestling? Even though I didn't realize that I was trying to, once I got back, I'm just like, this is it. This is where I'm meant to be.
Yeah.
So, I'm excited to be doing this now.
Well, and it seems like, because it was a varied path on the come up, that like you've developed this unique set of skills, and now here comes the streaming network and all of this stuff. And like, you're able to put a lot of this together because of the unique experiences that were varied enough that maybe they didn't fit, hook and eye necessarily to begin with, but they're starting to now. So that's awesome.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I look at it, and all I wanted to do is be a pro wrestler. I wasn't a particularly good one. I wanted to do it. And I sometimes look at it and go, when I first started doing, interviews and commentating and things like that, I remember just thinking, like, why didn't I realize like a decade and a half ago that this is what I should have been doing? I wouldn't be in as much pain, but it's, but again, I think those experiences, I think it was all meant to be, because those experiences prepared me to, I have found when I'm in a locker room, I used to do a lot of stuff with AEW for the network that I worked with before. And there was a point with AEW, I saw this with Impact. I could tell there was like a trust among people because I knew enough people from my previous life in wrestling that word would get around of like, nah, he's cool, he's fine. And you know how it is in the locker room, like the fact
that's a real thing.
Yeah. And I took it very seriously when people would be, talking about things that was very obvious that that's not for outside ears. And that they, trusted me enough that they weren't, kayfabe, which I don't think anyone's done since like the 80s, but since they weren't, Frank does it. That's good. But that meant a lot. And
Frank does it when his wife comes into the room. Though.
Yeah.
Kayfabe.
Wife is here.
Oh man.
So let's go back to OVW. Were you there when Jim Cornette was there?
No, I was there. So I got there at the end of 2007. So I heard a lot of Jim Cornette stories, but Al Snow was the one who was there at the time when I was there. Yeah. But no, I heard all the stories, the Santino story and all that. And from people who witnessed it, and it's, it's funny stuff. And I got to witness some cool moments that, are also like, you'll see things and then you'll see it reported. And it was like my first taste of reading something about it and going, I was there. That is not what happened.
Welcome to wrestling.
So I was there for the CM Punk Tony Atlas altercation. I'll put in quotes.
Okay. All right.
And I've heard Tony Atlas's version. I've heard CM Punk's version, and neither of those are
the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle is the truth. An altercation happened, but it wasn't, everybody looked a lot better in their version of the story, but a lot tougher.
Usually how it goes. Usually how it goes. Yeah. Well. Okay, so I got to ask this question then. Do you know a gentleman by the name of Scott Cardinale?
I do know Scott. So I have not seen him probably since like 2008.
Yeah. Scott and I came up together. We were both trained by Tony DeVito. And I know Scott was down there when I was still doing, like, I think I was working predominantly in Japan at the time, but Scott I know moved down to Louisville and was trying, same thing, giving it a go.
Yeah, Scott was in the same. I'm trying to think where. I don't really remember him from training. I remember him from shows. So he was probably
okay, maybe
the training point of having it, or maybe he was going to like the they had like the pro training that Al Snow would do with like the contract
may have
guys.
been.
He may have been going that, but
I don't remember.
Yeah, we definitely went to shows and definitely went to 4th Street after shows and stuff down in Louisville. But
all right,
which I hear is not as exciting of a place anymore. But
no, I don't
not
know.
that it was that. I mean, it was exciting for Louisville, but but yeah, no, but we. So yeah, I knew him. I mean, we weren't close or anything, but no, I remember him. He was a nice guy.
Yes, he is a nice man. He is a good dude.
Awesome,
for sure.
So let's dive into this network. How did it start? What was the brainchild? Walk us through the process.
Yeah, so I was working for Fight TV for about 4 years, and I'd gone on full time in the beginning. Actually, a year ago today was when I officially started full time. I'd been doing the full time work for about 6 months prior to that, and then it was just then we just made it official. But and look, nothing bad to say. I appreciated every opportunity I was given there. I started there. I was doing my own show called So Says Chernoff. It was like a satirical wrestling news show, and I would do it every month. And I showed it to Mike Weber, and he's like, yeah, bring it on here. And then from there, I started doing hosting stuff for them, and it was an amazing experience. But once I was actually in there, I realized that I had gotten to a point where I kind of needed a change. I felt that I had given as much as I was going to be able to, or maybe not as much as I was going to be able to give, but as much as was going to be received, if that makes any sense. And I had ideas that for whatever reason weren't able to happen where I was working. And, and so I was kind of like, all right, I'm going to go and kind of see what else is out there. And, I'd been doing some commentary. I'd been doing a lot of on-air stuff. But I also was doing a lot of producing, a lot of directing. And I was kind of like, all right, I know I can find a place somewhere. So let me figure out what I want to do.
Sounds a little bit to me like you were in search of the creative outlet.
I was honestly, yeah. I mean, that was a really big part of it. And I felt like I needed that. I needed to be able to create something. And while I was working there, my brother and I created an event called the Wrestling Showcase. And we ended up promoting that and just working on that. And that was a really exciting kind of departure from my day-to-day job, but still in the business, where I started going like, okay, I have no interest in being a promoter, but what can I do? Like, I like the creative aspect. I like being able to look at a product and say, okay, what can we do to make this even better? What can we do to get more eyeballs on it? And so, yeah, I enjoyed that creative side of it. So what happened was my partner, Paul Owen, he's the president of our company actually, but the executive team is myself, Paul Owen, and my brother, Fred. And we all do different things. Paul came up, he worked on the team for UFC Fight Pass. He's been in streaming his entire career, and he was hired by WWE to relaunch the WWE Network, the one that ended up, as he jokes, he did such a great job that it got bought by Peacock, and then he didn't have a job anymore. But
that'll teach you.
Yeah,
so he got a little too creative.
Yeah, right. So he did too well. But so he and we met at Fight, and and what's funny is he, which I'm sure no one believes, but he and I decided independent of each other to leave, and to the point where it was almost like when I found out that he had given his notice after I had given my notice, I was like, oh God, they're gonna like think we're like abandoning ship, you know, like
Mutiny.
yeah, like come with me, you know, and you know, and then what happened was, you know, my brother had been looking into, I think in doing the wrestling showcase, I think he saw a lot of from the content creator side, the promoter side. He looked at the streaming, the world, the way that it was, and all the options that he had, and obviously through me had connections to get this on the air, but he looked at it and was just not satisfied with it, and he's just like, man, this could be so much better. Meanwhile, you know, Paul and myself kind of both leave. My brother had been kicking some ideas around, and long story short, you know, it's you've got Paul, who's probably the best in the field at what he does, and then myself, who's, you know, mediocre. And you know, so but what happened was it just was a perfect storm of like, yeah, you know, let's see what this could be, you know, and it started kind of being like, okay, well, we're not there anymore. So we're free to do whatever. We're still looking at other options of what we're going to do. I was still talking to another company about going in and doing on-air stuff with them at the time, but we started talking, and very quickly the three of us were just like, I think we might be onto something here. And that became Premier Streaming Network. And it's amazing. I don't think anyone would believe us that, you know, I know my brother was coming up with ideas and filing things before he had ever said anything to us. But we really have been working on this since the beginning of November, and that's it. Which is a testament to the team, you know, that I'm able to work with, and everybody else that we've been able to bring on, helping with graphics and helping with just on the tech side of it, which is certainly not my expertise, the tech stuff. That's all Paul and his team. But we've been doing this for a short amount of time, but we all have a vision of exactly what we want our end result to be. And I think that's why it's come together as quickly as it has. My brother's experience of launching businesses, which is something that he's done in the past, he comes at it with that business experience, and you know, comes at it with the MBA, that, you know, he knows what he's doing in that regard. And from me working in the creative end of things and programming, I know what I'm doing in that regard, and Paul knows what he's doing in the tech side of it. And we all kind of overlap a little with each other. So, but we all know how to stay in our own lane as well, and really focus on that and do our job as well as we possibly can. And it's been an amazing experience. It's been just a couple of months, but it's unbelievable to think that we're going to be launching when we're launching, which I'm still not allowed to say yet, but very, 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 very soon. To the point where by the time this drops, you might even have a press release coming out. But I literally have, I have a meeting tomorrow, which is to get that green light that says, yes, you guys are ready to launch at this time from cause like we could do it now. It's it's all the apps. We're waiting for approval on all the different apps and everything. So I'm about 99% sure that it's going to be when we think it's going to be, but yeah, so hopefully by the time people are watching this or hearing this, it's already launched. And, but yeah, we just, I think a lot of the network in general, it came out of us being a couple of things. One, we're digital first. We're people who came up in the digital side of the business, and we understand it in a way that a lot of other companies have TV executives that, you know, I won't, you know, proclaim to know what they know about television, but it's not, you know, the 80s or the 90s or even the early 2000s anymore. And there's a very different way to market. There's a very different way to present these things. There's a lot that can be similar, but you have to understand it. And there's a lot that I feel like we have a better understanding of than a lot of the other people in the space.
Well, I mean, I'll say, and Dennis and Frank, I would think you would potentially agree, just because we're all similar age. Like when I was growing up, if you weren't on TV, like, how famous were you?
There's nothing.
Where now, there's some of these influencers and whatnot. I did a fight in Dubai in November, and there were people that were fighting on the card or were there or whomever, and like some of the younger people there were like making a fuss over him, and I'm like, I wouldn't know him if I fucking hit him with my truck.
Seriously. No, it's amazing though what social media and I mean, and just the internet in general, like it's just, I mean, there's plenty of people who have a voice who should remain voiceless, but but at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity for people. And that's something that I think, like, even with our network that we're excited with, we're working with a group called Chop Sports Media, and they've got a number of different podcasts and shows that are going to be on the network as well. And what I like about it is, nowadays, on one hand, it's so easy that anyone can start a podcast, right? And Lord knows everyone has. But then you look at a podcast. Well, no, but then you look at a podcast like yours, for instance, and what I'm excited about, what we can do and what we're doing with Chop as well is we're able to now give that platform because you've reached a point where it's like, okay, everyone can do it, but it's an oversaturated market.
Yeah.
How does this one good podcast stand out? How do you say, oh, you should listen to us or you should watch us? And everyone goes, why? And it's like, well, I talk about this. And it's like, well, so does that guy and that guy. So now we're hoping that Premier Streaming Network is going to be that people are going to look at our network on a level of quality that they can look and they go, oh, Bobby Fish's podcast is on there. Okay, that must be one of the upper echelon podcasts, as opposed to, and that's not to knock any of the podcasts that aren't on our network.
Go ahead, knock them.
Yeah, all right. Well, yeah, they're all terrible. But you know what I'm saying. So it's like we want to build a level of trust with our viewers where they can say, okay, we know, in the same way that if a show is picked up by Netflix, you've got an idea. You go like, okay, this is probably a decent show, as opposed to if it's like streaming on random.tv, whatever, So that's
I know
what we're
exactly
trying to
what you're saying. Yep.
So we're trying to do that, which is an exciting thing to be able to do because there's so many content creators out there. And another part that's fun of my job is to be able to look at what you've created and then say, okay, how can we make it even better? No matter how good it is, I always believe that you can get another set of eyes on it and somebody can have a different idea. Not necessarily a better idea, but a different idea. And eventually they'll come up. Eventually, when you work together with those people, you'll be able to come up with a way to make things even better.
Yeah. I think that just kind of goes for life in and of itself. I mean, it's almost even like the difference between being 20 and, your 20s and your 30s, or your 30s and your 40s. Like, just you learn as you get older and just get more life in the rear view, like to be more open-minded. At 25, you think you got to figure it out, but throw another decade on there and you realize, like, holy shit, how am I alive?
And
how did I make it?
Yeah, right. And it's what I try to remember that too, because I remember when I turned 20, I was like, oh my God, I'm so old. Then I remember when I turned 30 and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so old. Well, now this year I'm going to turn 40. So I'm looking at it and I'm reminding myself that because now I look back and, man, I'd jump back to 30 in a heartbeat. So I'm looking at it now and I'm going, when I turn 50, I'm going to be looking back at myself going, were you really complaining at 39 that you were old?
Right.
And then the same 60. So it keeps going that way. And so now I feel like I'm finally at a place in my life, which is what you're talking about. It's like where you start to realize you're more mature than you were in the past, but you also realize that you've yet to mature as much as you will another 10 years and another 10 years, because as long as you're open to keep learning, you're just going to continue to grow as a person. And man, but oh God, I look back at 25. It's like, how did I even tie my shoes? Like, I don't,
I have this sinking suspicion that the real kick in the dick is that, the process never goes away. Like we're gonna get to the end of, get to your deathbed, and you're gonna be like, yeah, I've almost got to figure it out. I do need another day, and I don't have.
No, we're never gonna figure it out. And the people who think they figured it out, they're the people they just stop. They stop growing.
Yeah, there's a name for them, Josh.
Yeah,
it's assholes.
Yo, there you are. Oh man, that's great. Yeah, it's true though.
Yeah. So
you mentioned the vision. What is the vision as a consumer? What can they expect from the network? And what's the future look like?
So they can expect us.
Yes, they can expect you. They can expect. So a couple of different key boxes that we wanted to check was the user experience. Because we all have those. I mentioned Netflix earlier, right?
Yes, sir.
We've all had that show where they win a bunch of awards and you go, all right, I should probably check this out. Mm-hmm. And you look it up. Where can I watch this? And it ends up on a streaming network where you're like, oh God, why couldn't it have been on this one instead? That's such a better experience. It's such a better user experience to watch.
Of course.
So we want to be the platform that if you're coming for pro wrestling or MMA or boxing or eventually even more than that, because we're already talking to a number of fringe sports and more mainstream sports and just and even outside of sports, just original content. So we're looking to just continue to grow. We're open to anything. But in the beginning, we are primarily pro wrestling and then some MMA and some boxing as well as we continue to grow. Obviously, my experience and Paul being from the WWE network, this is the business we know, and we want to start with that. But I think that the user experience is so important because we want, coming into this field, being the new guy, we want to make sure that people start to go, okay, this pay-per-view is coming up. Where am I watching it? Oh, on that network. Oh man, I wish it was on Premiere. That's what we want to get to. And I'll be honest, because I've actually seen the platform already. I think that's going to take maybe a day of people using it. I think somebody uses it once and they're going to go, oh man, I wish everything was here. Because it's just set up in that way. Because again, we've looked at it, and this is where I think our age comes into play. And Paul, is younger than me. But I think it's the fact that we are people who stream things all the time. So we have those complaints. When you have somebody who's been a TV executive who's been so busy that they don't even have time to watch something, which I'm now that busy, but before I wasn't. And we know the things. We can look at our platform and go, okay, well, this happens. Oh man, I would hate that if I was tuning in. We've had so many times where we're doing something and we'll look at it when we were building and go like, oh, that would just annoy the hell out of me. We can't have that. We've got to change that. And that which I think is something that's honestly going to happen over the first year and second year. I think it's going to continue to happen. And we're going to listen to feedback. We're going to be keeping an ear open and an eye out for the feedback from the users who are going to say like, oh, I love this, but I wish you could do this. And maybe the technology will be there. Maybe it won't be there. So it'll take a little bit of time, but we're going to continue to grow. But so far, I think that's the key thing is the user experience, because we can have the greatest shows ever on our platform. And if the user experience sucks, I mean, look, WWE Network, I loved the WWE Network before Peacock. I am not a fan of the WWE Network on Peacock. So, we don't want to be that. WWE Network on Peacock has everything as a wrestling fan you could ever want to watch, but it's like pulling teeth to find it.
Can't find it.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then also the content, we wanted to look, we understood we weren't going to be able to launch with, the biggest promotions. So it was very important to us to try and find the history of wrestling. We look at it almost like we're curating a museum. And we wanted to be able to, so one thing I mentioned earlier was ECWA. We have an exclusive deal with ECWA, multi-year exclusive deal. We will have their entire library I'm not even sure we'll have their entire library at launch because they keep finding more more videos and sending them. So I mean, we'll probably still be adding stuff after launch, but one thing that we will definitely have is we will have every single Super 8 tournament in the company's history all available, which Bobby, you're on. Because I uploaded that video. So but it's amazing. I mean, when you look at the talent that's
come through
just the Super 8 tournament, forgetting even any other side of ECWA or any of the other great promotions that we have, like Wrestle Pro. We have CZW, which, you know, modern day CZW is different than it was back in the day, but that library is amazing. And, you know, and I also think there's some incredible talent that's there today that is a great opportunity for them to be, you know, introduced to a larger audience. But that, I mean, you're talking about, you know, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, you know, people that they watch today, Adam Cole, you know,
I was just going to say Cole came through CZW.
You know, I'm trying to think, but also, I mean, just the Super 8, like I was mentioning, you've got Xavier Woods, AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels.
CD came through there.
Cash Wheeler. I didn't even realize he was in one of the Super 8 tournaments.
If I'm not mistaken, Low-Key was in one of them.
There's finals of one of the Super 8 tournaments, which is Tommaso Ciampa versus Adam Cole.
Wow.
I mean, tell me a wrestling fan who doesn't want to check that out. So, and that's something that's exciting. Is like, we knew the rich history of some of these promotions, but even things like Wrestle Pro, like I do commentary for Wrestle Pro, but I've only been doing that for the last year or so. So I'm going back and watching some of these old things, and all of a sudden there's post WWE, pre AEW Cody Rhodes walking out there, and I'm like, oh damn, okay, we've got that. And then I'm starting to see all of this different talent that's popping up that's come through there. And then you look at guys like people who are coming up who trained at Creative Pro. So you've got Wrestle Pro has the Acclaimed, MJF.
Really?
So it's incredible. And one of the awesome features that we have is if you go in and you search, which is something that takes a long time to get all that metadata in there. But if you search, you go in and you search Bobby Fish, every single match that you ever had that is in a library that we have the right to air will pop up.
Oh, boy.
So, which is something that
stinkers in there,
for better or worse, right? So but it's all there, and and that's something that I think is really cool too. I know that's something that the WWE network had wanted to do and wasn't able to do it, and so we have collections as well. So like if you'll go into a CZW, I mentioned guys like Kevin Steen and stuff, like he'll be a featured wrestler in the CZW section there. He'll probably be featured on the main page as well. But, you know, so as you know, a guy like a Kevin Matthews from Wrestle Pro, he'll be featured there. So you'll be able to watch a lot of his stuff. And as we grow and we get more libraries, there's just more and more content. Like you mentioned earlier, being a small world, it really is when you realize all these people that work to all these different places. And then there's the new stuff too that we have. So, I mean, it's just, I think it goes back to the user experience. I think people are just, they're going to love it. They're going to see these hidden gems in there, by event and by section. We actually have a hidden gem section as well for some of these matches.
Just as I'm hearing you describe this, like one of the cooler things that sticks out to me is the fact that, like, I think guys on the come up, like there's, you know, obviously there's benefit in doing the bigger shows and whatever, even on an indie level. But I was always a believer that, like, even the small shows, like you talked about before, working in front of one person or 10 people, anytime you have an opponent and a ring and an audience, like that's your stage. And some of those times where, like, because there's not a lot of people out there, you might like not put as much effort into it, or you will just not be as concerned, so you might let loose a little more. And in those moments, I swear to God, like I've seen people develop things that they ended up keeping in their act, and it's happened to me myself, where like, you know, because you don't have the reservations and you're not worried, and you're like, oh, you know, for lack of a better term, like F it, I'll whatever, and you stumble upon a gem, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna keep that.
Yeah, it's a great time to try things out. But it's funny is nowadays, like, yeah, you try it out, but now with streaming services, it's also like everything's everywhere. So you have to, even if there are only like, you know, a couple people in the crowd, you still got to be on. But but it's a great way to showcase, you know, new talent. And then that's something we thought was important too, is having all these new shows. And we've got some great promotions that are going to have, you know, young up and coming talent. But now that talent who's going to go on our platform to watch their stuff back is also going to be able to go and watch things and learn from, you know, people like yourself watching your matches. But also, you know, you joked about some stinkers in there. Yeah. I think that's really important too, for them to be able to look back and maybe look at that and go like, oh, okay, there's Bobby Fish. Okay, I see him the way that I'm used to him, but oh, he's not quite as polished as he is today. And kind of like let them know in a way like, hey, that's okay. You know, like even the guys that are really polished now had to start somewhere. And
it's a process. It's a process. And I really don't like, anytime my advice has been welcomed or whatever, that's part of what I'll say is like, there's only so much. So like you can be a great athlete or a great this or a great talker or great whatever, but there's only so much expediting of the process that is possible. Like there's a certain amount of repetition that you just got to have to get it, or you just don't get it.
And even it doesn't matter how, look at a guy like a Kurt Angle, right? You could look at him in his first year and everybody goes like, he just took to it like a fish to water. He was just incredible. But then you look at him a few years later and it's just night and day. He's so much better. And it's like, even the guys that learn quickly, to your point, they still need time. Because seasoning. You have to have that. And that's with anything, I think, in general. But
but I like what you're saying about somebody, you know, younger talent coming up, and they can go back and see some of the growing pains and see, you know, when, you know, you did things a little bit uglier and you weren't quite as smooth as you are present day. Yeah.
And I think also some of the, you know, to somebody who might say like, oh, well, you know, you don't have the WWE pay-per-views on your network. And I say like, okay, but you're getting, like you talked about all those, they're pretty much like getting all the house shows, all the things where people are really honing their craft. And they have time and they have, you know, some of the ones that are more experienced, they have that time to work, and you can really, I mean, there's so many great matches on our network that I am just so excited to be able to actually like announce and showcase these matches to people. So yeah, it's exciting. And I hope that this ends up being something that people in the industry, as well as like, you know, fans, obviously, but I hope that people in the industry are going to end up coming to this site. And I think they will, because I think a lot of people are just going to go, man, I've never seen that match of mine. I want to check it out. But I think that it's something, like we said, we're curating it like a museum of this stuff, you know?
I would like to point out something to that effect as you were talking here. There is a difference between TV wrestling and, you know, wrestling. And the way that it was done back in the day, or even the way that it's just done at a house show, or done where there's a little more freedom and there's not such time constraints and you're not worried about TV angles and blah, blah, blah. So like sometimes performers, you know, you're able to just feel it more. And a lot of those occasions are generally just for the house crowd. And what you're saying now is that like this service is going to provide some of those to be seen on a wider, like you don't have to be in the arena that evening. You could have caught, you know, this thing that was just different. And that sounds cool.
And then we have also shows like yours, you know, which is awesome because it's an opportunity for people to come in and have kind of that destination destination television is what they would say, but destination streaming. And while you can watch your stuff on demand, it's also, we want people to be able to get excited in that way. So like, if they know your show is coming on at a specific time, a specific day, and they have nothing to do, well, okay, go watch some old stuff, go enjoy that, check out, a preview of something else that's going to be coming up soon. And then, it's this time. Okay, I can check out the Undisputed podcast.
Right.
And then when that's over, you can go right on the schedule and go like, oh, there's this other show coming in. So we have kind of married that like on demand aspect and also that specific scheduling, we want to just keep people there. We want to keep you on the platform, 24/7. We want you there. And trust me, there is enough stuff to keep you on there all the time. It's a lot, but it's going to be great. And I'm honestly, I'm really, as a lifelong wrestling fan, it's really exciting to be able to put all this content on here. Stuff that I had never seen before. I get to be like the first one who gets to check all this stuff out. It's like, and you think back to the tape trading days.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Man, it's just, it's so much easier now to digest the stuff. And,
it's the tape trading days.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Wow. I haven't thought about those yet in a while. But
it's so much easier now. That's when you start to feel old and you go, oh, kids these days, they'll never understand.
They don't know about the tape trading.
Yeah.
They don't even know what a VHS is. It's crazy for me because, Josh, I know like I wore out like the VHS tapes of the war games and stuff when I was a kid growing up. And then, all these years later in my professional career, to be in some of the war games matches was so surreal. Like, what are we talking about? And yeah, that's really cool. And this is all going to be kind of a destination sort of thing for you guys there. It sounds really just unique. Like I don't think I've heard something described in a similar vein, I
appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're going for, and something we were, Paul and Fred and myself were talking the other day about how like, there's been a lot of hype around it. People are really getting excited about it. And we haven't even launched yet. We don't have anything. People are hyped and excited about something that they're trusting us, what we're telling them it's going to be. And we take that very seriously because, we're building this up to people. And that is how confident we are that people are going to be blown away by the platform.
Awesome.
And I just, but again, at the same time, we're very confident. We think people are going to be blown away. We think they're going to love it, but we also understand that it is not going to be perfect. And we want to listen to the feedback. We want that feedback so we can keep making it better and better and better.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's being open-minded like that. And if you're looking to deliver the best, you're not going to deliver necessarily the best right out of the gate. Like you can't, that's an unrealistic expectation. But with today's day and age, with streaming and with all these advancements, like, I mean, to be able to tweak along the way and to, change things and do things in that way, like it sounds brilliant to me.
I'll tell you, our first live stream that we are going to do is actually the Major Wrestling Figure Podcast. Matt Cardona and
come
on. It is it's their live show, their live stage show that they're doing, and that is the first live stream. And so I'm actually going to be emceeing their event as well, which I've done one of those in the past for them. But I can tell you, I am not going to be nervous about standing out in front of people talking on a microphone, but I am going to be incredibly nervous at that point, knowing that I don't know if everything's going smoothly, because that's like what I want to be doing there is sitting there looking at my phone or at my computer or on the phone with our tech team going like, is everything good? Is everything good? But I'm going to be the last to know if it's streaming well. Fair. So but we're ready for it. And
your faith will be tested.
Yeah.
Have faith.
Yeah,
Have
seriously.
faith, my friend.
But, so that's one thing is, we're hoping, we know there's going to be growing pains with anything that's new.
Of course.
But we're planning, we'll be ready. And, we're excited for it. I'm really excited for it to actually launch and for people to be able to just come to it and enjoy it. And, and again, like I said in the beginning, having your podcast on here is awesome. We are so excited to have you guys on because it's just, to have that type of content, where there's somebody who's actively involved in the wrestling business and involved in MMA. And like, it's exciting to be able to have that as opposed to just, I can get on there and talk,
Sure.
but it's great to be able to go to it and just be like, this is Bobby Fish, who's actively involved right now in the business. Let's listen.
We're excited. We're excited to be a part of it. It sounds awesome. And I got to say, like, as a man of faith myself, like, it's not always the easiest thing to have that faith in, and I'm talking life in general. So I can understand the anxiety going into the launch and everything. But I think he's working it out for your good. I think he's got a plan.
Hopefully it's a successful plan. And,
I think so.
But that's another thing.
A lot of hard work's going into it, and that will be,
and that's another thing that we're really, appreciative of you guys as well. Is I mentioned the potential users who are excited about this, and we haven't launched yet. Mm-hmm. But to have the for you guys to have the trust in us as well, mm-hmm. to sign on to be a part of this without actually, having it up and running yet, mm-hmm. Means a lot. And we're really, we're grateful to you guys for that. And we're excited. I just think, your listeners and viewers are going to love it. They're going to love the experience. It's going to be mm-hmm. easy to digest the programming. And it's just going to be fun. I'm ready to go already with it.
I can tell. I can tell. We're excited to be a part on the ground level, on the, launch, and to be, to have the opportunity to grow along with the network. That to me is one of the coolest elements, is that we're going to grow right along with the network itself.
Definitely. Yep.
All right. I think we're going to end it with this. There's been some talk. Been some talk about the old infamous Iggy. Now we got 2 professional wrestlers on the show. We got,
1.5
and Bobby.
Well, 1.5.
What about my one match that I wrestled? Naked?
Okay, I got 3. Give us the definition.
If we get too far into that, Dennis, somebody's going to get arrested.
That's true. That's true.
Give the
I don't know if the network's ever been shut down before it's launched, but
Dennis, don't.
Okay, we'll keep that under wraps.
Give the proper definition of the infamous. See what I did there? The infamous Iggy.
That's why you get paid the big bucks, Frank.
Frank, the master of wordplay.
The wordsmith, Frank Ferraro.
Brother.
Oh, God.
I don't know, Josh. Do you want to field the Iggy question first, or you want me to lead off?
I'll let you lead off.
Okay.
But one thing that I think we can agree on is that it can be kind of different depending on how you came up and where you came up in the business. But
I agree. For me, the first introduction to the Iggy, or the Office. It was actually called The Office to me by Tony DeVito when I first started training. And it was a silent form of communication that would exist between performers in the ring. And it was any number of physical squeeze or rub or whatever you want to call it. But it was... So let's just say, and I hate going like the inside baseball terminology here, but I'm going to do it for the sake of this making sense. So let's say Josh is going to shoot me across the ring, and he gives me a little bit of a squeeze on my wrist, I know he wants me to reverse it. So that's the office, or that's the Iggy. Now, over the years, and I don't know, a guy like William Regal or Finley, from the day when there was much more nonverbal communication, like there was much less discussion in the back in their day. We've kind of bastardized this thing called pro wrestling with the current version, with so much discussion. So they may have only done it one way, but in the current incarnation of it, you will get guys doing the Iggy to say, nice, like good match, or that was, favorable, or, whatever. Like it's a nonverbal communication. So that's where it can get confusing for people. And some Iggy's are
better than others.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, like, I remember what's funny for me is I don't really have much of a memory of like the post-match Iggy. Like I don't, I'll remember, like there were times where, I remember one time in particular, I had somebody in a chokehold, right? Like it was, and they're going to tap out. And I gave them the Iggy for them to, cause I was calling the match for them to tap in the sense that instead of being like, hold it longer, slow down, do it. Like I was able to sell, I was able to yell whatever I wanted to. I'm choking them. Their head's all the way down under my arm anyway. Cause I have a guillotine choke. So I was able to just kind of give that little squeeze. And that was when they were to tap, to just kind of, so they were going based on my feel of how long they should be fighting and then tap out. So there were things like that. The reversal was one that I remember, clearly. And obviously, my time in the ring versus your time in the ring is very, very different. But, you have way more experience and with that, way more times of experiencing that with different wrestlers. So I'm actually kind of curious for you, because I don't, off the top of my head, really remember it standing out of like I guess I kind of remember the post match. Like most of the time I was on my back. So, I, when I was in there with some real pros, but yeah, so for you, like, I mean, I guess it can be confusing, right? Like it can be to kind of dance around the conversation a bit, but like it can be a confusing thing, right? Like it's the same to simplify it with the example that you used. I would think it's like, imagine that if I give you a squeeze, to you, that means I want you to reverse. But to me, it means I want you to, take a drop kick, right? Like if that's, which would never be, but like if that was in my mind, well, that's going to go terribly wrong. And that's what I'm saying is like, so when you have people with a different opinion of what it is, or a different understanding,
and so like I know there were a lot of Iggy's. I did a lot of work in Japan early on. In Japan, there's a language barrier, obviously, and so there was a lot of physical communication that way in Japan, and guys just never seemed to fuck it up. It just was a kind of a learned thing. And I'll say this, as far as my own work. I developed and have a very strong dependence upon a Muay Thai technique that I learned training legitimate martial arts, which is the plum clinch. And it's basically, I'm clinched around your neck, and like, I don't want to say like I'll shoot on people with it, but in a working manner, I have control of you. Like, you're not going anywhere. So if I'm trying to, I can get messages to you that way with the clinch, and you're, like I said, you're probably not going anywhere unless you know how to get out of it. So it takes some of the miscommunication out of it, and not necessarily in a way where it's like, okay, well, he's being a dickhead. Like, no, you're going where I want you to go.
Yeah. You can slow it down if you want to slow it down.
Yeah.
You're gonna.
So I think that and it may just be the evolution of modern day pro wrestling, but I think like there's a place for that stuff. Like I think it would do a lot of pro wrestlers some good to learn some of the nuances of the plum clinch, to know how to control another human being in those instances without it being necessarily obvious, just my 2 cents, I suppose. But yeah.
So I think we can put the Iggy to bed.
Oh, Frank. Oh, boy, Frank.
Nighty-night, Iggy.
On that note, Dennis, Josh.
Oh man! Well, thank you guys so much for having me on.
Thank you.
I hope any of your listeners are still tuned in after my stories.
No, I think your stories were fine. It was just Frank's Iggy joke at the end. I think may have just turned a lot of people against us.
Yeah,
may have lost a lot of followers on that one.
Is it worse than the Iron Sheik impression?
Yeah, no, nothing is worse than the.
I haven't heard that.
Bubba.
Yeah, no, that's not.
There you go, Josh.
That's something. That's something.
Thanks for asking, Josh. Appreciate that.
Brother.
All right. Well, I think that definitely, if the show weren't over, it's now. It's over. Frank?
I want to say hi to Daddy Magic for giving me a shout out on your Twitter page, and all the followers behind it who gave me a ribbing on Twitter.
Okay.
So thank you very much. Thank you.
Twitter sucks. I don't know how you feel, Josh.
Hate it.
But Twitter, I mean, I've gone back and forth. I don't want Twitter anymore.
No,
it's a
I don't either.
Dirty, shitty place full of shitbag people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will consider myself successful when I have reached a point in my career where I can pay somebody to do my social media for me. That's that is the ultimate success. That's what I mean. Where I can just live in blissful ignorance, not knowing what's going on in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mentioned earlier people it was given a voice to people who should have remained voiceless. That's
Twitter.
Yeah,
that's Twitter. You basically just outlined what Twitter is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. The people who should be voiceless. The voice of the voiceless.
But having said that, you can follow me on Twitter at
yes, at least for another day or two.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, enough of the Twitter bashing. We'll cue that up on another future episode because bashing Twitter's good.
All right. Well, Josh, thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank
Josh.
you guys.
And man, we are excited. We are so
Absolutely
excited going forward, man.
Awesome.
Really excited.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, well, Frank has added his 2 cents. So say goodnight, Bobby.
Good night, Bobby.